What's up, guys? Michael here to talk about people, but make them small and bald. That's right, babies. And specifically, is it good to have them? Because increasingly, people are starting to think, not so much. Recently, public figures like Prince Harry and Meghan Markle or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are starting to argue that having fewer or even zero children might be the most moral and/or most responsible thing to do. Of course, for folks who've always dreamed of birthing a little tyke or two or a baker's dozen, contemplating the idea of not bringing life to an adorable monster like this is understandably upsetting. So it's worth asking, is having a kid, or even a lot of them, a positive way to pass down your superb head of hair and green thumb? Or is there something irresponsible about bringing life into this slowly sinking Titanic of a planet? Let's find out in this Wisecrack Edition. Is having babies ethical? So how has procreation historically been regarded? Well, Christian morality has long held that having children, if you can, is a good thing. In the Bible, God tells a bunch of people, like Adam and Eve and also Noah, to be fruitful and multiply. And obviously, some people do still take this imperative very seriously. If you don't believe us, go meet some Midwestern Catholics or just rent Cheaper by the Dozen 1 and 2. But it's also an imperative that's been challenged by philosophers. For instance, take Schopenhauer, a crotchety pessimist who thought that we may as well be living in the worst of all possible worlds. And he didn't even live to see the season finale of Hawkeye. He believed reproduction was little more than an unwelcome side effect of humankind's endlessly failed attempts to satisfy our desires. A moment of physical pleasure then, i.e. doing sex, could result in offspring, thus continuing the human race and the misery of its existence via kids that will grow up and be just as miserable as you. It's like your middle school health teacher told you, sex has consequences. Meanwhile, in his book The Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche paraphrases the ancient Greek wisdom of Silenus, which was given to a tragic king by a man with the ears of a horse. It is best not to be born at all, and next to that, it is better to die than to live. To be clear, we do not endorse this message, and we hope that Silenus' friends gave him a big hug after he wrote that. Philosophers call this view, that it is bad to be born or to have children, anti-natalism. The most prominent contemporary proponent of anti-natalism is the South African philosopher David Benatar. We talked about him in our video on Attack on Titan if you'll want to check that out too. Benatar, like Schopenhauer, thinks the world is really, really bad. But interestingly, he argues that it would still be morally wrong to bring new human life into existence, even if the world wasn't a greenhouse filled with farts. See, Benatar thinks that there is an asymmetry between pleasure and pain. We all know it feels good to experience pleasure and bad to experience pain. But Benatar argues it's only bad not to experience pleasure if you're conscious that you're being deprived of said pleasure. Like, if you didn't know that this 24-karat gold ice cream existed, you couldn't be sad that you will likely never have the pleasure of indulging in it. But now you know about it, and we can all be depressed together. Conversely, it's good not to be in pain, even if we're not conscious of that lack of pain at all. We don't have to be thinking about how it might feel to sit on a cactus to be enjoying the state of non-cactus sitting. But now you are, so you're welcome. Thus, the asymmetry between pain and pleasure. Bringing people into existence then gives them the ability to feel pleasure and pain. And this, for Benatar, is morally bad. Because no amount of pleasure could ever outweigh the wrong we've done to someone by giving them the ability to feel pain. So, thanks, Mom. As it happens, Benatar argues our own world is characterized more by pain than it is by pleasure. And if you don't believe us, just ask Ben Affleck's face. But even in a hypothetical world where everyone only experienced pleasure, it still wouldn't be right to bring someone into existence, says Benatar. That's because he thinks such a life would be about as good as a state of total non-existence. For this reason, Benatar argues having kids can never be anything other than a selfish act. At one point in his book, Better to Have Never Been: The Harm of Coming into Existence, Benatar even compares having children to taking hostages, as people can use their children to leverage better treatment in society. One of his examples is, if two women need a kidney, but there is only one available, and one of those women is a mother and the other is not, who does society think should get the kidney? But people aren't all questioning the morality of baby making because they've read David Benatar. For the most part, it's because they've been watching the news. With this crappery greeting us every night, it's no wonder 1 in 4 child-free American adults say they plan not to have children because of climate change. As we all hopefully know, the climate disaster is being caused by the pollution, in particular the carbon emissions of human beings. It therefore makes sense that reducing the number of humans would help the crisis, especially the number of humans in developed countries who are responsible for the bulk of emissions. For more on how to fix the climate crisis, check out our Wisecrack Labs video on carbon capture. Over the past 200 years, the Earth's population has gone from 1 billion people to 8 billion, and it's only going up. Perhaps it would be right to see this sort of growth as unsustainable. Now, Exxon is obviously way more responsible for this large-scale pollution than you and your Honda Civic. Still, individual solutions for combating or at least mitigating climate change to some extent have become more well known. We're all aware we could be reducing our carbon emissions by eating less meat, flying less often, or investing in an electric car. Though not a Tesla. Please, never a Tesla. We know that we should be buying zero-waste products or conscientiously sorting our recycling. But empirical studies have found that, of all the climate-friendly changes, by far the most effective would be, don't make any new little polluting machines. In other words, have fewer kids. If you get rid of your car, for instance, you might save 2.4 tons of carbon a year. But if you have one fewer child, studies have argued, you save on average 58.6 tons a year. This is what Harry and Meghan are supposedly doing by limiting their family to only 2 children, which we have to applaud. If the average child emits 58.6 tons of carbon a year, just think of how much pollution the average prince emits. Who knew that ending the monarchy was such a climate-friendly move? But having children might not be bad just because they're bad for the planet. Benatar goes so far as to argue that having children is bad for the sake of the children themselves. This makes sense. I mean, climate change? Now, maybe you don't think that existence right now is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you can order sushi while you go to the bathroom, and we're getting 2 J-Lo rom-coms in the first half of 2022. But you might be able to agree that existence in the age of climate change already is, or might eventually become, not great. Even in the best case scenarios, life over the course of the next few decades is likely to get really difficult for much of the planet. Who's to say that a child born today wouldn't eventually really vibe with George Bailey?
I said I wish I'd never been born.
It's generally understood that parents feel it's their duty to ensure their children have the best lives possible. But who can honestly make that guarantee today? So this is getting pretty depressing, especially if you like babies or your name is Ann Geddes.
This is what it's all about, you know, this sense of joy that comes with babies.
So what hope is there? Well, some philosophers would argue plenty. For many, arguments like Benatar's don't really hold up because human beings just don't work like that. Consider, for instance, the views of Hannah Arendt. For Arendt, every human action always meant a new beginning. People, for the most part, don't just do the same stupid things over and over again for no reason, unless their name is Sterling Archer.
Lana, introspection is the enemy of happiness. So my advice is, don't. Always worked for me.
Has it though?
I don't know. That's the beauty.
Rather, they are constantly striving, if often imperfectly, to do something new and hopefully better. And this theory of Arendt's doesn't just apply to adults. It's also about children. Children, after all, are never simply carbon copies of their parents. They might resemble them in certain ways, sharing similar experiences, backgrounds, and proclivities, but they are not identical, and therefore, they are able to do things differently. Arendt used the word natality to signify this fact, the new beginning, as she called it, inherent in birth. For Arendt, natality was incredibly important because it's what helps save us from disaster. And she was making this optimistic argument after the horrors of World War II. After all, if everyone really was identical to their parents, if there was no new beginning inherent in birth, then we would always be doomed to do the same things. Too set in our ways to ever stop doing the things that we know are causing everything to go wrong. But luckily, that's not the case. I mean, just look at the suburban teens on TikTok posting videos about why France Fanon rips. Their lame-ass parents would never. Because children have the capacity to do things differently and better than their parents, Arendt argued. The birth of new children is not only a morally good thing, it's our only coherent source of hope. Sure, things are bad now, but our children are not doomed to emit as much carbon as we do. they can choose to be different. Life in the age of climate change might suck, but that doesn't mean our children will be incapable of rising to the challenge. Nothing, of course, is inevitable. Natality does not mean that our children are necessarily destined to succeed. They might grow up to host a YouTube channel. Well, who put that there? It's not funny. It's what I do, and I'm proud of my job. I'm proud of this. But from the perspective of the human species at least, continuing to have children despite everything is the only course of action that really makes sense. In this view, reproduction isn't selfish, it's hopeful. So what do you guys think? Are children a source of hope, or is this just wishful thinking? Is it okay to bring new human life into existence, or would we be doing our children a favor by never having them? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you're interested in learning more about this topic, check out Infinitely Full of Hope by Tom Whyman, who just so happened to write this very video. Thanks as always to our patrons for all your support, and be sure to check out our podcast. Hit that subscribe button like you're popping today's birth control pill out of its pack, and don't forget to ring that bell. And as always, thanks for watching. Later. I know about birth control pills because I'm a man.